All right, in this video, we're going to take a look at some examples of ellipses and identifying the coordinates of the center, vertices, and foci of them. All right, so example 1a, we have x squared over 36 plus y squared over 25 equals 1. So let's get a good idea of what this looks like. So here's our ellipse. And as far as the center of the ellipse goes, notice we're not subtracting anything from x and y and using parentheses. So because of that, our center is the origin. So right here. Another way to find the center, there's actually a few, is if we look at what the vertices are, which we'll get these answers in a moment algebraically. If we look at the midpoint of the vertices, or we look at the midpoint of the co-vertices, either interpretation, the midpoint of the vertices or the midpoint of the co-vertices is going to be the center. Also the midpoint of the foci as well, but since we don't have those yet, it's really not going to do us any good. So our center is at 0, 0. So it's at the origin. Now for our vertices, the 6 and 0 and negative 6, 0 that we saw in the picture, how to get those is we look at our larger denominator, which in this case 36 is a larger denominator. Notice the 36 is below the x. So because the bigger denominator is below the x, that means our ellipse is going to be wider than taller. So because we have a larger value below the x variable, that means our ellipse is going to be a little bit more wider in this case than taller. So the closer these two denominators are, the more it looks like a circle. But in any event, a squared is, this should actually be a squared is 36, which makes a plus or minus 6. So it's a squared equals 36, not a equals 36. But it's plus or minus 6, which means from our center, we're going to add and subtract 6 to our x coordinate. So we're going to go 6 units to the left and 6 units to the right. If the larger denominator was below the y, we'd go up and down. So in this case, our vertices are going to be at 0 plus or minus 6 and then 0, which is plus or minus 6 and 0. So here we have a vertex at negative 6, 0. Here we have a vertex at positive 6, 0. Your foci is c squared is a squared minus b squared. So a squared is 36 and b squared is 25. So 36 minus 25 is 11. And when we take the square root of that, we get c equals plus or minus a square root of 11. So our foci, our focal points, are going to be the square root of 11 spaces going to the left and the square root of 11 spaces going to the right. That's going to be about 3 point something. So our foci are at 0 plus or minus the square root of 11 and 0, which is plus or minus the square root of 11, 0. So if we want to see that, we get square root of 11, about 3.32. There's our one focal point, so we'll label that F2. And we have negative square root of 11, 0 as well, and we'll label that other focus point F1. So, and again, note that the midpoint from these foci is also the center as well. So we have that to work with too, if we need it. All right, moving on to part B, we have y squared over 16 plus x squared over 1 equals 1. And if we want to see what this graph looks like, let me eliminate these other ones here. Here is our graph for part B. Notice this one is tall because the 16, the larger denominator, is below the y. So for the bigger denominator below the y, that's going to make your ellipse more of a tall ellipse than a wide ellipse. And the 16 versus 1 here for the denominator, it's going to look, it's going to have quite a ratio of height to width here. So in this case, we have our center again is 0, 0 because we're not subtracting anything from x and y. So we can have that center point 0, 0. And let me just zoom in here so it's a little bit easier. Well, maybe not that much. A squared is going to be 16. This again should be a squared equals 16. Lousy typos. Which makes a plus or minus 4. So from our center, we're going to count up and down 4 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4 for this vertex, and down 4 spaces. So our vertices are at 0 and then plus or minus 4. For our foci, we're going to take a squared is 16 minus b squared is 1. So 16 minus 1 is 15. And we get the square root of 15. So our foci are at 0 and then 0 plus or minus the square root of 15. So that simplifies to 0 and then plus or minus the square root of 15. So if we look at that, here's the positive square root of 15. And then 0 negative square root of 15. So it looks like they're really, really close to the vertex. So in this case, it's very, very close to the edge of the ellipse, but it's not your focus point is not going to be on your ellipse ever. So, all right, that about does it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you.